In this video, I will be ranking all 13 civilian abilities in Dive Death from worst to best. Yep, I'm really part of the Dive Death migration, aren't I? When starting a round, you must claim 2 abilities. This will be what you have to work with for the whole round and alter your appearance, as well as possibly changing your stats like health and stamina. There are 11 abilities that can appear on cards you claim, so how do we get to 13? These are synergies, a special character you get when combining 2 abilities indicated by these colored cards. The 2 synergies in the game are Love Shot and Care Pad, who each have a unique gimmick tied to them and what I will count as a separate ability. So that gives us 13 abilities to rank from worst to best. Please keep in mind that I have roughly 8 hours on this game when recording this, so not too much experience with each ability, and my opinion can and probably will change in the future. For now, think of this as a first impressions ranking, and that these placements are based purely on my personal experiences. For this reason too, I will barely be mentioning any events in this video and purely focus on the regular games. And before I start, remember to subscribe to the channel as we shockingly approach an insane 20,000 subscribers. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Number 13 is Hot Dog. None of the abilities in this game are necessarily bad, and each can and will have times to shine and end up fitting their piece, becoming incredibly helpful at specific times. Hot Dog here is an ability that is just not useful for the majority of time. This is a survivalist ability that doesn't give you any stat debuffs and is a consumable. When you eat the hot dog, you gain 15 HP, 5 max HP, and lose 5 stamina. This ability is also notably a full 3 seconds, so it's very worth noting that you want to treat this ability like Shaletsky's Fried Chicken in Forsaken and self-heal when out of danger and out of the killer's pursuit. Now, this ability has a relatively short 25-second cooldown, so you can actually heal up an okay amount after a minute or so of hiding, but if it wasn't already obvious, the catch is losing 5 stamina for every single use. Now, in my opinion, stamina will always be more valuable than health in a majority of scenarios. Think about it, let's say that you have an extremely solid 125 health, but for that, the trade-off is only having 75 stamina. You can now take 7 hits from the killer instead of 5. Now, the killer has a whopping 35 more stamina than you, and if that gap were to be shorter, as if you didn't eat the hot dog, yes, the killer can kill you 2 hits sooner, but you can outrun and dodge them for significantly more time. The killers can deal up to 20 damage per second with such short cooldowns, and with such a huge stamina advantage over you, can tear you to shreds incredibly quickly. Having an extra 25 stamina makes an astronomical difference, and this is way more worth it than sacrificing that much stamina to be able to survive 1 to 2 more rapid hits from the killer. More about Hot Dog though, it is of course still healing a solid 15 HP every time. This is just alright when you think you're okay to sacrifice maybe 5 to 10 stamina, but I cannot exaggerate to you how important this stacks up. So a self-healing ability that could sometimes not even be worth using, quite a joke of an ability. Not to mention the gag is that where your avatar genuinely gets slightly fatter every time you use this ability, so now the killer can visually see how much of a pushover you are to kill, knowing that the fatter you are, the less stamina you have. Lastly, Caretaker and Carepad also just exist. Caretaker can heal multiple people 20 HP every 30 seconds, and Carepad can heal multiple people 20 HP every 10 seconds. The presence of either of these abilities in most scenarios will just completely invalidate the need to debuff yourself for a weaker heal. Yes, a self-healing ability means you don't have to go out of your way to get healed by someone else, or God forbid there aren't any other healers, but still, you get it. Hot Dog is by far the worst ability in Dive Death. Number 12 is Taunt, and here's where the video gets a tad controversial. Taunt is the first Sentinel ability on the list where you need to, well, taunt the killer by doing a little dance very close to them for a second or so, and if they're in hitbox from the taunt, they will gain 3 debuffs. The killer will become visible to all survivors for 5 seconds, you will get invincibility to retreat for 2 seconds, and the killer's view is significantly obstructed for a little bit. These debuffs are just alright. The invincibility is a given, and the visibility to all survivors could be useful at times. Something notable is that being taunted doesn't give you stun protection, so sentinels will have an easier view of you to punch or shoot. Speaking of which, if a killer is previously stunned, it's incredibly easy to taunt them directly after and stack debuffs on top of them. This is exactly where taunt is optimal, but really, how much is it really worth it? I haven't played an astronomical amount of killer or anything, and the most this has done to me is trip me up just the tiniest amount. All of that for you to go out of your way, taunt near the killer, and now be the new target the killer will almost absolutely lock onto after, and that's if you land the taunt. The gimmick to this ability is that a missed taunt will give you an incredibly loud sound cue to basically scream in the killer's face that someone is extremely vulnerable to damage right now. And if you're even close to being in pursuit of death, it is extremely risky to use this ability at all. And that's just the overall problem. The devs made taunt way too risky to use, and if the killer is aware of your location, or even if they aren't, taunt is so reactable and is mostly just optimal at times where the killer was just stunned. But to go so up close and personal to the killer, it's hard to even decide if that's worth it. Of course, if killers are in pursuit of a nearly dead survivor, they won't lock onto you, and that's where jumping them and possibly disorienting them is most worth it. In general though, taunt is what I think is the second worst ability in Dive Death. Number 11 is Block. Block is a really strange ability in my eyes. I genuinely sort of question this ability's existence. It's just incredibly basic and a pure survivalist ability that just feels like it could have been a bit more unique. Anyways, I think this ability is still good. Not great, but good. With a relatively long 40-second cooldown, you go into a block stance for 2 seconds. If the killer hits you while blocking, you gain 10 HP. Yeah, and that's it. It's incredibly simple. Pulling this off requires a pretty good prediction of the killer's moves and is, not surprisingly, hella punishing if missed, giving you an extra second of end lag for the killer to tear you apart. Predicting the killer's swings isn't too bad in my opinion, but when you're against a killjoy, this ability is just borderline overpowered for the projectiles to be so easy to react to. But honestly, this ability just suffers from its long cooldown. Assuming you block perfectly, it is 10 health every 40 seconds. That isn't great when you take into consideration you're likely being the one chased the whole time. Once the killer is in reach, they will rip you to shreds in an instant for how Dive Death is balanced. A good majority of chases are spent catching up. If you were already close enough to the killer to be able to land a block initially, it is extremely rare to keep a chase going for another 40 whole seconds for how this game's bouncing works, even with the assistance from teammates. But the stuns in general in this game aren't very long either. Generally, block could be used as a better ability, but it's towed back from its design and intended use, which just doesn't work in Dive Death very well. Number 10 is Adrenaline. Alright, with the bottom 3 out of the way, I'd say this spot to around number 7 starts to become more or less interchangeable. I think the Adrenaline has incredible potential, but is actually pretty hard to pull off in the most competitive spaces, and in other words, I think this ability might be the most skillful in the game, but I'll get to that in a bit. What immediately puts this ability out of the bottom 3 is that it still finds itself being useful in a more casual sense too. Adrenaline gives you 6 seconds of extreme speed to immediately flee from any sort of scenario. After 6 seconds, you're paused in place for a full 2.5 and emit a few particles, so you can't just necessarily hide all the time. For a 35-second cooldown, this is very generous, essentially letting you exit any dangerous situation whether you're being chased or not. However, if the killer remains in pursuit of you when using Adrenaline, or you didn't make the full use of 6 seconds and ended up stopping not as far away as possible, they will have plenty of time to catch up and punish. You simply cannot use this ability at the start of a chase because the speed and distance are precise enough where you will be caught up to relatively quickly, and this is where I come in and say that this ability might just be the most skillful in the game. As mentioned earlier in the section about Block, Dive Death is designed where a huge majority of the chase's length is spent catching up to the survivor. This game is a huge looping issue, but that's covered in the next video. Now, during this time, if you maneuver well enough with dodging and trickery, you can gain a stamina advantage over the killer, and that's where Adrenaline shines. If you can time your Adrenaline well enough, you can use your stamina advantage and use it to the absolute fullest potential by sprinting the entire time and leaving the killer in the dust, because they won't have nearly enough time to catch up to you. Getting into a scenario where this is optimal is obviously very hard to do, but extremely beneficial if pulled off right, and for a game which has such heavy looping issues like this one, boy, does it make quite the difference. Adrenaline is especially good in LMS for these reasons too. Number 9 is Cloak. Cloak was the ability I swung around this list the most, and it feels like every time I bring my mind to it, my opinion changes. It is 10 seconds of complete invisibility, not letting you use any abilities during this time. You are also notably still collidable to bumping into the killer and will be forced out into immobilization. Speaking of which, you could not move for 1.5 seconds while activating, forced into 2 seconds of end lag after, and just as mentioned, can still be caught. Lots of ups and downs to consider for this ranking. Now, let's put the aspects of Cloak into the context of Dive Death and its player base. There is very little reason to need to use the Cloak outside of being the one being chased. If given assistance from a teammate, such as stunning the killer, you have time to activate Cloak and hopefully escape. or you can use it as soon as the killer attempts to engage a chase. Those are the most useful situations you'll find Cloak in, but it sort of ends there. Killers won't ever let you pull it off during a chase unless harmed, and with a whopping 50-second cooldown, well, let's just say you aren't necessarily going to get a get out of jail free card for every single chase. Cloak can find its uses to get outside of chases, but generally this is a disengage ability to use really to keep yourself from being chased until later in the round, though I still think it's a relatively solid ability. Number 8 is Punch. Punch isn't very well designed in this game, honestly. While I think it's definitely the weaker of the two main direct stunts to the killer, it's still alright but comes with some design flaws I'm not a fan of. Punch is the longest stun in the game with a solid 3 seconds, a stun that is definitely worth the reward of the extremely short range and the extremely reactable windup. It is a bit too easy to dodge out on the killer's side, and the short range doesn't make it very viable as a surprise attack ability like Taunt is designed for. It's a bit too hard to use as both a surprise attack around the wall or during a chase, but generally it's still a 3-second stun that can save teammates, and that always performs better in a ranking than survivalist abilities. I really don't have much to say about Punch, however. Oh, and as we approach the halfway mark of this ranking, if you like the content, don't forget to subscribe. We're approaching 20,000 pretty soon, and I'm curious if we can hit that before the holidays. Thanks. Number 7 is Banana Peel. Forget what I said about Cloak because this ability is the most disputable one to rank. Every opinion I see on Banana Peel is either calling it terrible or a top 3 ability. There is surprisingly little middle ground. Banana Peel is quote unquote a projectile ability where you place a banana anywhere on the map you want, sorta like a trip mine. As simple as it gets, the killer can run into it and slip on it. If done, they will be stunned for 2 seconds, despite it not actually counting as a stun, leading to a worthy combination to punch or shoot them after for a longer stall. When shooting the banana, there is a full 2-second delay. I mention this because the game doesn't have enough thin corridors to simply block the killer from entering a certain area unless there's multiple bananas. For this reason, your best bet to hitting the killer is hiding behind the wall and surprising them. This is very hard to time correctly as you need to predict their movements, pray that you're hidden well enough, and think 2 seconds ahead of the killer. Banana Peel has a couple gimmicks though, such as being able to slip on your own too. This is really something to figure out once and you never bat an eye to again, but this also means that you can't use it as looping blockade as you're just as susceptible to it. Also, this ability can be combined with dash to do this insane sliding tech, launching yourself when ragdolled by slipping. This gimmick makes Banana the dependent factor though, as dash can actually do this from fall damage too. Banana Peel has an extremely short cooldown, so if the map offers linear enough corridors to constantly surprise the killer and or you can work together with other sentinels to give the killer longer stuns, Banana Peel is actually pretty good. Number 6 is Bonus Pad. Bonus Pad's usability is especially elevated because this game suffers from the worst looping problems known to mankind, and while that's a topic for another video, it will still be a driving factor I consider in this one. Bonus Pad is the first of the 3 support abilities on this list, despite almost being in the top 5 already. For 2.5 seconds, you build a pad on the ground that gives anyone who touches it a solid speed boost for 3 seconds, and this can be used over and over and over and over as many times as you want. Placing this around a looping spot or in a common area of the map to run from the killer more effectively makes bonus pads notably extremely powerful at times. The jump from number 7 to number 6 is also pretty large in this ranking. This pad is up for a whopping 40 whole seconds, which compensates for the 60-second cooldown easily. There's no reason to not place the pad right back as soon as possible off cooldown, so you could have the bonus pad down for everyone, especially in the same spot for the majority of the round. This pad provides huge value for the team in almost any scenario. Something very notable I must mention is that this is the first ability on the list that actually depletes your actual stats to balance its power onto you. For having a bonus pad, you will have 10 less HP and no stamina changes. This isn't anything crazy and will become a lot harsher later on, but it is worth noting that you are still the tiniest bit more fragile in this sense, and hopefully your team is aware and vows to protect you for the bonus pad. Number 5 is Revolver. Moving into the top 5 is none other than Revolver. This is what I think is the dominant stun ability in the game for its seemingly infinite range. With Revolver, you shoot a gun which moves at a relatively quick speed in a straight line. If striking the killer, it will stun for 2 seconds. The stun is a whole second shorter than Punch, but it can obviously be used from literally any range. This ability is incredibly hard to aim and time properly, however, and actually requires some extreme levels of prediction, an eye for movement, and actual aim too. It can be used up close too, of course, but for just a 2-second stun and generally being dodgeable by the killer, it isn't nearly as effective in this sense. When using the revolver, you actually have an ammo of 1. While yes, this sounds unnecessary, this is actually a clever balancing strategy to force you to need to reload after its 15-second cooldown. So yes, while it has a 15-second cooldown, one of those is to be immobile while reloading, so it isn't spammable in the chase, so the actual reload time is 30 seconds. This definitely balances out the power of the revolver, but doesn't stop it from being very versatile, powerful, and useful beating up punch in almost every way. Having this ability will deplete your stamina by 10, however, and if you paid attention to my 500-word argument of why Hot Dog is the worst ability, you'll remember me saying how stamina is way more valuable than health in pretty much every way, but at least this isn't as impactful here. Either way, Revolver is balanced pretty well, but in the hands of the right person is an incredibly good ability and deserves top 5 in Dive Death. Number 4 is Love Shot. It isn't actually intended for this and Revolver to be next to each other, that's just a coincidence. Love Shot is actually very difficult to rank. So, this is the first synergy ability on the list. What this means is that to obtain this ability, you need the synergy of both Caretaker and Revolver, and this ability replaces Revolver despite functioning the exact same. Basically, Love Shot works the exact same as Revolver, but every single shot you land gives you a really good 15 HP. If you can land enough shots, yeah, that's incredibly good. The reason synergies are hard to rank is because, well, how do I put this? Basically, the ability Love Shot isn't official, that's the synergy name. Its gimmick overrides Revolver for the heal, but having Love Shot removes 10 stamina from owning the Revolver, but also removes 25 HP from owning Caretaker, but having Caretaker isn't considered as part of the Love Shot gimmick because Caretaker is its own ability, but that's still 25 less health to consider anyway, but for logical purposes I am not considering the 25 less max HP with Love Shot because I'm not counting the ownership of Caretaker ability as part of the ranking to place it in number 4. That's simply because a gunshot heals 15 is good enough to justify this placement. Sorry if that was confusing, but there's nothing else to say, so time to move on to number 3. Number 3 is Dash. A dash ability in a game like this? Say no more, that's an easy top 3. Dash feels like it should be balanced. In an earlier draft of this ranking, I did put it higher, but even regarding its notably harsh debuffs when reading it on paper, I still couldn't help but place it this high. Dash is the final survivalist ability on this ranking, being a highly versatile launch in any direction you please, and it goes really far as well. When I say versatile, I mean like very versatile. It has tech with banana peel to slide you an incredibly far distance, or just use alongside the fall damage ragdoll. It can launch up slopes like this insane spot in base plate, and I guarantee you that this is the tip of the iceberg of what Dash can do. But here's the kicker. Using Dash instantly depletes an insane 35 stamina. This sounds devastating in a game like this for crying out loud, but with not too much thought put into it, it isn't that bad if just used correctly. If you use Dash in a chase opener to instantly get a head start, you're now down an insane 35 stamina and potentially even more when paired with Revolver and its 10 less stamina naturally. So why not just use it in a chase where both you and the killer are down in stamina? Using it when you're like 2 away from true 0 won't punish you harshly, and you can't go negative. And yes, hitting true 0 stamina will happen, but in my opinion is overridden by this game's balancing, as true 0 isn't nearly as dangerous as a game like Forsaken. And Dash has an insane 25-second cooldown, making it even more versatile and spammable. Dash is just an incredibly powerful ability in games like these, and the effectiveness that this one can show is just unmatched, absolutely deserving of top 3. Number 2 is Caretaker. Yep, the top 2 abilities are both healing abilities, probably an anticlimactic top spot as it's identical in Forsaken 2, but in games like these, I feel like that's just bound to happen. Caretaker is the primary healing ability in Dive Death, healing 20 health to anyone in front of them when using the ability every 30 seconds. Yep, that's it. Does that sound powerful? Because it is, especially when stacked. Caretaker is literally in need of a nerf. I don't even know where to start. 20 health every 30 seconds is pretty solid enough, especially when you consider if timed well enough, this could be applied to someone while in a chase. Depending on the killer, they might just immediately target you after, but it is sure something that you can do. And of course, any number of people can be in the splash zone to get all 20 health too. For owning Caretaker, you are hit with a devastating minus 25 max health, which is the most impactful debuff in the game despite not being very fitting. You better hope your teammates protect you for that one, and there's no form of stacking nerfs whatsoever. It's literally just constant heals if you end up with 2 to 3 Caretakers on the team. So truthfully, these top 2 spots are by far the easiest to explain, so just push it to number 1 is Carepad. The number 1 spot on this list is easily the other synergy on this list, Carepad, no doubt in my mind. To obtain this synergy, you need both Caretaker Caretaker, and Bonus Pad. This is currently the only other synergy on this list, but should its rarity justify its power? In my opinion, no, it shouldn't. Care Pad is relatively simple though. The Bonus Pad ability is reworked into the Care Pad ability, working sort of like the Dispenser in Forsaken. Everyone who stands on the Care Pad will be healed 2 HP per second. Yeah, 2 HP per second for an infinite number of people. That's totally balanced. So you're typically going to have this one up for around half the round per Caretaker. This is stupidly powerful for the ability of a single character, being able to heal so many people so quickly and provide insane value. You can obviously make the argument that this groups people up, but people don't usually make the full use of it, or the killer can just play the hard target game and not let people ever have a chance to heal. For a game that is so stupidly survivor-sided when enough teamwork is utilized, does this really matter? At the end of the day, it's still 20 HP every 10 damn seconds. Care Pad has the most striking debuffs in the game of minus 35 max health. As controversial as this may seem, I don't think this is very impactful. With Caretaker, you had to be involved for your full value. Not only will people protect you with their life, but you can also just slap down a Care Pad and hide for as long as you'd like. Yes, Care Pad also of course has the Caretaker ability in its arsenal too, but as mentioned in Love Shot section, that won't be considered for the sake of the ranking. At the end of the day, Care Pad is, in my opinion, the best ability in Die of Death. Alright, that's the end of my first video on this game. Sorry this one took such a long while to make, but having to learn and hopefully be as accurate as possible in my stat references isn't easy to do. Also, this one turned out a lot longer than I expected. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed and have a great rest of your day.